My name is Kayla. I've been leading innovation in the tech space for the last 10 years of my career, and I find it thrilling to be in the unknown and be able to navigate all these changing, shifting guidelines and circumstances. Up until recently, I didn't have a name for that until I came across a Harvard Business Review article from 2018 titled, "If your innovation effort isn't working, then look who's on your team." And I found in this article the perfect title to describe what I love to do and what I'm great at, and that's chaos pilot. The article describes chaos pilots as having something called negative capability, which can be described as the ability to be comfortable with the unknown, with uncertainty, and even entertain it. What is a chaos pilot? Why, well, they're a leader that's able to drive a team forward even as the environment and circumstances around them fluctuate. Now, how I've been able to do that successfully is I always start by gathering as much information as possible. I'm someone who am always prepared, or at least I try to always be prepared. Even in my everyday life, when I'm traveling or visiting a friend's house, I'm known for carrying a backpack around with me that just happens to have all the little supplies that you're not sure that you would need, but you do. Tissues, hand sanitizer, phone chargers, water, snacks, you name it. Chances are I've got it in my bag. And when it comes to work, I like to be just as prepared and have in my toolkit all the information that I can possibly gather. Try to eliminate as many of those unknown unknowns as possible. And for the ones that remain, have contingency plans in place. You know, if we can't do A, what can we replace it with? Is there a B, C, and D? How far can we go down the list before we reach a point where it's just not possible to move forward and we need to pivot in an entirely different direction, which isn't ideal usually on very tight timeline projects. Let's take a look for a moment at an example of when I was a chaos pilot. This is one of my favorite stories to tell because it's also something I'm really proud of that happened. I was working at Forbes at the time, and one day my boss stopped me on my way to the pantry to get some water, and he said, "Hey, Kayla, I need you to do me a favor. No vacations for the next 6 months. No holiday, no time off. We need you in the office." And I was really confused why. I knew that we had a big project coming up with a whole site redesign because what I was working on and responsible for at the time were our internal tools, which weren't planned to be part of this redesign effort, only tangentially through the other front-end products. And I had asked him why, and he said, "Because there's a big project coming up and I want you to be part of it." And I was like, you know what? I'm your girl. Let's go. And when I found out that the project was to create a high-touch, high-fidelity, beautiful article experience that not only would be great for the readers, but also great for our brand partnership content, I was thrilled because this was something I had been advocating for from the moment that I joined Forbes, to focus less on just showing as many ads as possible and to create a better reader experience on the site instead. And this project was going to be it. I got the chance to work closely with another PM on the team, and as some of you can imagine, having 2 PMs on one project for one product that included both back-end and front-end services could be quite complicated. But we were able to communicate regularly, and we had a great balance between what we each were best at. Kelly is great at keeping track of items and making sure that ceremonies are being followed, working closely with stakeholders, and having positive relationships with them. Whereas I'm better at the technical things, the problem solving, the digging deep, figuring out what are the unknown unknowns, what are our contingency plans, and how can we move forward from any roadblocks that appear in our way. I'm also really good at delivering bad news to stakeholders, which Kelly wasn't as comfortable with at the time. And so between the two of us, she would tee them up with all the good news, and then I would come in and give my best version of no that wouldn't leave them either angry or disappointed. But we only had 6 months to create a whole new CMS product, a whole new front-end template, and make sure that all of our stakeholders were happy, which included sales, marketing, brand partnerships, and the editorial team. It was chaos, and I've never felt more empowered and thrilled to be working. It was definitely a tough time from a team perspective. Morale was low, and I had done everything I could, including creating new social events to help bring everyone together and keep everyone on the larger team communicating. Because across 6 different teams, rebuilding a website in only 6 months is quite a daunting task, much less building something brand new from scratch. For the premium article content, which is the product that I was responsible for launching, we had to start with looking at what are we doing now? What are our brand partners looking for? What advertising requirements do we have? Not only how does it have to function technically, but how do people interact with this tool? How can they easily use it and have this charming, frictionless experience and make it stable and have it ready not only to be used, but to publish an article within 6 months? My team was nervous. I had 2 lead engineers who are quite senior and excellent at what they do, a small group of undergraduate interns, designers, QA, 3 front-end devs, another DevOps engineer, and amongst this huge team, we not only had to coordinate 2 different backlogs, but make sure that everybody was working in conjunction with one another. And my whole thing was trust and honesty. I said to my team, it will only be successful if we're working together in harmony. And so I don't care if it's a stupid question. I don't care if it's something that you've asked 3 other times before. Don't be afraid to voice your opinion and contribute to this, because it's not just my direction that matters. Everybody has to have input into this if we're going to be successful. Thankfully we were, but it wasn't without headaches along the way. When Kelly and I had approached all of our stakeholders, they asked that we do one thing. And the head of brand partnerships had explicitly asked me, she said, Kayla, if this is the set of features that we're agreeing on, I need you to promise me that no matter what, it's not going to change. And well, it was a promise I hated to make, because it was one I definitely knew that there was a 50-50 shot that I could actually keep it. And I'm a lot of things, but I'm not a liar. And so I said to her, look, I will do everything in my power to make sure that this list doesn't change, but that's as much as I can do. I can't promise you that it will, but I can promise you that we will do everything we can not to change it. We got about halfway through the project, and suddenly my lead dev is in stand-up with everybody, and he says, hey, I don't think we can build this feature. And it was one of the biggest features that all of our stakeholders were so excited to use. And suddenly I saw my promise reflected back at me. I had promised that nothing would change, and now I had to go back to them and say, hey, we actually do have to change something. And so I knew that that hard conversation had the potential to just create a mountain out of a molehill. And while we weren't able to do the feature then, the team was pretty confident that in enough time we would be able to figure out a replacement. But with such an aggressive timeline, that's not always possible. So I went back to our contingency plan. You see, when we started off, before I even spoke to any stakeholders, I asked my design and engineering team to sit down with me and come up with a list of every possible feature we could include in 6 months. Everything. It didn't matter if it was something we thought they would use or something that we didn't think that they would use. We looked at all of the past content that had been created using other tools that were not specialized for this. We looked at what competitors were doing. We looked at what industry and design trends were happening. And I tried to cover as many bases as I could, because I had this feeling that if something had to change, if everything went wrong, I needed that contingency. I needed my backpack. I needed my backpack full of any supply that I could think that I would need in the future. And thank goodness I did, because when we found out that we couldn't build one of the flagship features of this new product, I just went right back to that list. And we discussed what could we build in the remaining 3 months. And luckily, we were able to highlight a few options for the stakeholders that, based on the conversations that we had been having with them over the last few months, as well as what they had been working on and all of that research that we conducted, that we could find something that wouldn't exactly replace what was missing, but at least would make them happier. And sure enough, that conversation went great. Stakeholders weren't actually that disappointed that we weren't building this feature anymore. It turns out that their plans had changed. They weren't really planning on using it for the initial story that would be published or any of the subsequent ones that were already planned. And so we were in the clear. As long as it would be on the roadmap and we would find a replacement eventually, we could replace those with features that they actually wanted more. And having that conversation ended up helping us build a product that not only was stable and charming to use and frictionless to publish on, but that helped build out a whole new revenue stream for Forbes, increasing the sales team's revenue by 40% in the following year, which is pretty good if you ask me. But yeah, I think that in a lot of other circumstances that, maybe somebody else would have failed in that role. But I've always been somebody that being in the unknown and being prepared for the unknown is really second nature. And it's not only that, but it's something I love doing. I love over communicating and digging deep and figuring out what is possible in such tight time frames. And after that experience at Forbes, building the premium article, I was able to replicate that success at Sony Music and then at Blue Label, working with some of my clients who had very aggressive timelines or very complex projects. So when people ask me what I'm looking for in my next role, I want to be a chaos pilot. Put me behind the wheel and I'll help drive the team towards success, no matter how unknown it is.